whatever you're drafting, whether it's a room or a spaceship or something, any sort of drawing, there's ways to do things fast and in control and precisely, and ways to do them really sloppily, as you maybe have experienced. So I want to sort of work on with a couple of exercises that I think will be fun, where you will learn how to use these function keys and these OSNAPs to really make that predictable, when to turn them on, when to turn them off, and use them in combination with each other. Top of page 2, let's just start with turning the grid on and off. There's function keys. You can type a command. There's also just the toggle down here, which is it's always there. It's graphic, and it's obvious what's going on. And if the grid becomes overbearing in terms of the lines you've got, and it's just starting to get in the way of you seeing things, you can reduce the grid down to just dots at the intersections of the grid lines. Right-click on that and pick Grid Settings. And then over here, let's do Windows Plus. We can choose to have the grid style dotted in this flat 2D space that we're working in. So if you prefer that, but we get dots at the intersections, which are sometimes can help you line things up. For the time being, I'm going to keep the dots turned on just because the lines get pretty intrusive. Also, we can choose to have the cursor snap to the grid. So if you're drawing a building with concrete block that's always in 8-inch increments, we can just set the grid to be 8 inches horizontally and vertically, and click only to those grid points, so we know that what we produced will line right up. Let's take a look at how that works. If we go back again to right-click Grid Settings, there are two things going on. So there's the display of the grid, and that can be whatever you want. And there's also the actual points that the cursor snaps to. When you're working with an existing building, it doesn't make much sense, because you want to be in complete control of where those lines are. 3 3/4 inches over this way, not snapping into 8-inch increments. It's much more likely that you would use this designing a new building, where you get to say how you want them. So retrofit, probably not. For this exercise, let's just say this one with 8-inch block walls. First of all, we're going to say, let's turn this snap on, so that we will be snapping to these points. Let's snap these to 8 inches. That wants to be 8 inches. And if you don't have feet and inches in this particular drawing, just set it for 8 units. And if you want, you can uncheck equal X and Y. So if you want them to be equal, you can do that. If you want them unequal, you can uncheck that. So that will be the actual points that the cursor clicks to. But I like to have something sort of larger to organize the building itself to be visible. Let's make that like 4 feet or 48. So let's make these 2 feet. This will give us a light grid every 2 feet, and then every 8 of those will get heavier lines. Sort of be able to see the large picture, and then when we zoom in, we'll still be able to keep track of it. And then within that, we've got the smaller dots going on. Actually, I'm gonna unclick that to be able to see the lines, actually, because the dots are too small even to see what color they're on. So let's see if this let's see if this works. Okay, we got to scroll down and save. Say okay. So what you can see here, I can hardly tell those differences. I would like those to be much less obtrusive, or maybe strong. Maybe the little ones are less obtrusive. So if we go into again, wherever in options you do colors, we have a choice here of the color we want for the major lines, the dark ones, and the color we want for the light ones. So I'm going to say my major lines, I'm going to make these quite a different color, bright red, and my lighter lines to be you know, pink. Apply. Okay. So this can be as subtle or as strong as you want. All the color stuff is on options, display, and it's different on a Mac. It's, you know, preferences like that, and then down to colors. And for right now, the only ones I want to do are those major and minor grid lines. Okay, so here's this grid. It's set up for light ones are 2 feet apart. The big ones are 8 of those, so 16 feet apart. And the grid itself, as I had it set up, was for 8-inch increments. But let's just do a line. And you can see my cursor is snapping around there to there to there to there. So 3/8 is 24, and that's what we were looking at. And these can be reset anytime through the drawing, however you want to work it. Using the grid per se does not lock me into horizontal and vertical lines. That's a function of our ortho, which is turned on right now, so I can only draw those. But if I want to draw a 45-degree wall up there, again, sort of snapping to the corner points, I can turn ortho off, just click on that. And now I'm free to move at any angle as long as it ends up on one of our 8-inch snapping grid. And that way I'll still be on module when I come back to there. In answer to Cherokee's question, this really does not help when you're measuring a space because you don't know if it lines up with the grid or not. That's part of what you're trying to find out. If you just want to draw something freehand inside here now, let's say some little rectangle, I don't want to, that's not where I want it. That's not the size I want it. To free myself from snapping to that, we turn the snap mode off, which you can do either just by clicking on the dots or by typing snap mode 0 or by hitting F9. And I would suggest that right now, I'm just going to use this because it's visually clearest to what's going on. But so now I can draw a rectangle any old place I want. Or, and this is when this starts being really useful, you might want to start on a known grid point and then end up somewhere off it. So the option might be, let's say, I'll go to rectangle again because that's clean. So I want to turn grid snap on. So I'm clicking to one of these places, but then the final point wants to be somewhere different. I'll try F9 this time to turn that off. And now I can put this anywhere, anywhere I want. So I think a lot of what we're doing, especially, well, whether you're measuring something and directing it or drawing something new, is being aware of what the options are. What do I need to snap to? Will AutoCAD do that, or do I have to zoom way in? And the answer is you should never have to zoom way in to make things touch each other or meet or be at the place you want them to be. There's always a tool that will make that accurate and faster and easier. Okay, draw me a couple of circles. So you can do circle, hit enter. Oh, let me backtrack one thing. When I first started working on this computer, and it's still here right now, to pick things, let's say erase. I had to get like my little cursor like right on that guy, and I would think I'd pick something and I hadn't. So we can make that bigger so you don't have to get quite as precisely accurate. And that is with the PICKBOX command, which you can type, or with Mac, it's preferences, cursor, and selection. With us, it's AutoCAD. Again, it's options. All these settings are under options. And it's under display. No, I'm talking about, well, first of all, I'm talking about this thing called, oh, yeah, well, let's start with that first, actually. right now you see I've got a crosshair that's, you know, sort of this big on the screen. AutoCAD used to come with crosshairs that went all the way across top to bottom. And you have this huge thing moving around. It was really crazy. It wasn't like a fine point. And that's what the crosshair size, if I wanted it to be all the way, then it can be like that, which is handy if you want to sort of line stuff up with something that's somewhere else. If it doesn't have to be like perfectly exact, but you can see those larger relationships between things. But it's really, to me, it's really distracting. So I'll go back to, I can just hit spacebar because options was my last command and set it back to, you know, I don't know, 5% of the screen. Next, I want to make my little PICKBOX bigger so I don't have to like right exactly on top of things to select them. And that will be again under, let's see if I have this right again. Selection. Yeah, ours are under selection and yours Mac is under cursor and selection, where we can change the size of that little PICKBOX to be more useful. It's going to vary depending on the resolution of your screen, how good your eyesight is, how much of a hurry you're in, you know, like that. So I'll just make mine a little bigger. And one last thing, while we're here, if I have my object snaps turned on, which I do, and I'm drawing a line, the aperture, it's called a system variable, it's just a setting, controls how close you need to be to an object before AutoCAD starts looking for points on it that you might want to use. So if it's a small aperture, you have to get like right up next to it before the OSNAP things show up. I forget where that is. I'm just going to type aperture, which you can, all of these end up being a command you can type. And right now my aperture is 20. I'm going to make it 50 just to show you what's going on. So if I do a line all the way out here, my cursor is sort of picking up that endpoint, which seems to me a little too far away for comfort. I like to be sort of down in this zone. So I'm going to change my aperture back to whatever it was before, 20. And I don't know what units those are. Are they pixels? I don't know what that is. So now if I do L for line, I have to get in pretty close before things start to highlight. So what are all these highlights? Grabowski does it well in chapter 10, but it's nothing like seeing it actually happen. If you click the little down arrow next, or right click on the object snap icon, these are all the conditions that AutoCAD can find just by doing math. Can find endpoints, which it indicates with a little square, midpoints, which is indicates with a triangle, centers of things. Let's do this. Let's check endpoint, midpoint, and center, and also quadrant and intersection. Bear in mind that there are some others here. And these are what are called running object snaps, which mean they're just in effect unless we tell it either forget object snaps entirely or just for this next pick do something else. So let's just draw a triangle to the centers of the circles. I'll do line. And if you notice when I go to a circle, because I had quadrant points turned on, quadrant points being the 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock points on a circle, I can snap to the quadrant point or to the center. So I'm just going to go from center to center to center. And then to go back to there, I can either just click that same point again, or I could snap to an endpoint, or I could just type C to close up that loop. AutoCAD has been consistent over the years of trying to make many ways to do things, which makes it confusing because you try to figure out which one can I use. And in fact, there's probably half a dozen ways to finish up what we're doing here, but I'll just go there and click. Let's turn midpoint off for a minute. So right click uncheck midpoint. So all the others are still working. If I'm doing line from endpoint to endpoint, those are all still working. But let's say midpoint's not something I do very often, but I need it just this one time to go back to the midpoint of this, and I'm not turned on to do that. It's not one of our running object snaps. So that's a case where you can, just for the next click, tell AutoCAD, no, pick midpoints on this one. Ignore all the others, just do midpoints. And this is the same on both systems. It's a shift right click, brings up this one little temporary, just for the next point object snap. And now it'll click to the midpoint. And then we're back to our regular running object snaps. And you can do that even faster with shift right click M and do that. It's hard to see here, but each one of them has a unique beginning letter, or you can just come and pick the one you need. A couple other ones that will be handy for you. One is called the perpendicular OSNAP. So let's say I'm doing a line. I know this point over here, but I want it to go perpendicular to that line over there. I can't just, I don't want to eyeball it. I want it like right at 90. Shift right click lets me pick perpendicular. And then it brings up perpendicular with a little, 90-degree guy, and there it is. If you do, it's sort of frenzied. Frankly, endpoints is going to be, most of them will be that. Just sort of picking up from where you started and going. Be doing an exercise later on with a Fibonacci curve and making a mandala and stuff that we might just need to click the other ones. We'll see. I tend to have only 3 or 4 of them that I use the most turned on all the time, and then just do the override for whatever I need. And if you're just tired of all these things, snapping and clicking, F3 will just turn that off completely. I was waiting for it to click, but I've turned it off. So you can draw it off for a while, just to freehand, and then F3 turns it back on to start snapping again. Okay, so this is sort of like you taking control of how you work, what your screen looks like, what your cursor sort of is your interface with the drawing, and be able to decide how that looks is a useful thing. Here's one more thing I found out. I wanted this text height to be as big as possible so you guys could see it from back there. There is one thing you can do. If you need more room on your screen, you can make that smaller. Display fonts. So command line window font. I just made as big as I could, just to be able to see back there. If you find it's too big and you want smaller, you can set it to a smaller size. Have you enjoyed all the puns in the AutoCAD book? It's like whatever we can do to liven this up a little bit. Yeah, they've been doing that for, I don't know, 20 years or something. When you're doing the drawing, were you in a position of needing to move, erase, copy? What once you'd drawn things, what did you need to do anything to them, or were they perfect to start with? A couple things to review quickly. Just selecting things. If you need to move them, if there's no command active, and you just click and click, the default thing that AutoCAD does is select objects in that window. You don't even have to say select or pick or choose or erase, because AutoCAD originally was set up that you first pick the name of a tool or a command and then pick the objects. With Windows and the Mac influence, that has switched to the point that you can also pick the things and then pick the tool. So this is an example of being able to pick the things first and then decide what to do with them. So again, if you window in this direction, you get a solid line and a blue shading to indicate what's been picked, and things highlight as they become completely contained within that rectangle. And it's always a rectangle at this point. It's not, a circle or anything. If you drag right to left, going this way, you get the dotted line rectangle, and it's green, and it selects everything that it even touches. the other way, they have to be completely contained inside it. And then you can move them or erase them, whatever you want to do. And then there are two others that are similar. So those are when you pick a corner, let go of the mouse button and pick another corner. So click and click. If you just drag, you start creating a lasso.
As with the rectangular selection window, if the lasso starts going left to right,
it'll be a lassoing window. So we'll only pick things that are entirely contained within it. Again, this is like the first little mouse move. If it's going left to right, it's going to be this window. If you go in the other direction and are starting right to left and drag, it'll put together a crossing one. And as soon as anything is touched, it'll be selected. And then from there, you can change the color or erase it or move it or whatever you need to do. One that's sort of related to that is what's called a fence. And a fence is just a line. Oops. A fence is just a line that operates like the crossing tool. And for that, you need to pick the command first, like erase. And then say select objects, and you type F for fence, F, enter. And now we're drawing a line. And as it crosses things, it selects them. And this is handy for if you want to trim all these guys off at one time to that line, you can do fence and pick across like that, and then all those get snipped off at one time instead of pick, 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 pick. Let's say you want to remove everything except one or two objects. Let's say move this time. One of the selections you can do is type all. You'll pick everything on the drawing that's not on a locked or frozen layer. But you need to be careful with this because there might be things that you've drawn that are off your screen that you don't realize you're erasing. So you want to be careful that you're not doing that. So if you say all, but I want to keep these three circles, I can then type R to remove. And remove those. And let's say these guys. I need to put one of the circles back. I can do A to start adding things back to the set. So in all these, we're building the idea of a selection set, which is like a group of objects. Each of these objects, it's got its own unique identifier in the AutoCAD database. It's not just points on the screen, it's an actual object. So I said move these down here. And then something else goes on and I realize, you know, I need them a little farther up, but that's an awful lot to pick. Let me just move the previous ones. So let's say move, then P for previous, and it picks those again. And it only picks the most recently selected group. You can't sort of backtrack 5 selection sets back. Then you can do that. The reason we're doing all this in the first place is, you know, we communicate our design intent to everybody else involved, whether it's the owner or the contractor or the tile guy or the electrician, with lines and circles and arcs and text. And we want to have as broad a repertoire of those as possible. But there also needs to be like some agreed upon sense of what construction drawings are and what these lines mean and what a rectangle in a given situation means, because that'll be different from a space planning to an elevation. We're learning to do meaningful drafting as part of that. Right now, I'm just sort of dealing with the nuts and bolts of that, and a couple of more drawing tools I want to introduce, if you haven't found them already. And one would be the basic concept of a polyline. Up till now, we've been drawing lines or arcs or whatever.
we can select any one of these, erase it, and it goes away without affecting any of the others. They're not connected things, they just happen to touch.
What a polyline is, where's polyline? Oh, right here, right, big one, is a series of connected segments, whether they're arcs or lines. I'll just do lines to start with. Escape. And then when we pick that, it's all one thing. We can move those points around. This might be an egress path that we draw to see how far it is from the back corner of a room to the door. It could be a railing. It could be the edge of a driveway, it could be any kind of a thing. We can combine straight and arced segments. If you're drawing a driveway, you can draw a straight piece, and then just with A and enter, switch into doing tangential arcs until we hit escape and finish up. If we select this guy, we can see here it's a polyline. All these rectangles we've been drawing with the rectangle tool are also polylines. They just happen to be, come back to their starting point. It's not a square or anything. It's not a hexagon, but your rectangle tool has a drop-down arrow, and which gives us the options for creating regular polygons. And the first thing they ask is how many sides? And let's say 7. Let's say 8, just for. And we have a couple of ways to draw that. One is we indicate a center point, and then
a point on the polygon.
And the other way is to do the edge one, which is where we draw an edge, and then AutoCAD kicks in with the rest of it. So let's look at those together. Let's do the edge one first because it's a little cleaner. So E for edge. So as I'm drawing the point, AutoCAD's live drawing the appropriate octagon. If I knew I wanted an octagon to go inside this circle, polygon, octagon 8, enter, center of polygon. So I want to be able to click to the center. So if my object snaps were turned off, I'd want to turn them back on again. F3 would do it as well. So there's that. And then it's asking, do you want it inscribed inside the circle or circumscribed about the circle? And I'm going to say inscribed, which is the default. Hit enter. And then I'm going to pick that quadrant point. It could be any of the quadrant points to put that in. No guessing, no squeezing or stretching to make it fit. It's like right on the button. Copy. Once they're drawn, polygons are not fixed. They're like any other polygons, are like any other polyline. You can use them with grips or move individual faces. So maybe that's a starting point for you. Maybe it's a, if I were doing a coffin, I might start with a coffin like that and then just move this line down to here. Haven't drawn too many coffins recently. And there's one other tool that will come up in a couple of different contexts, and that's the spline tool, which is a fairly recent addition to the AutoCAD repertoire. When you're making a polyline, it's a series of straight lines and true arcs. Each of these has a center point and a radius, each of these sections. A spline is an irregular smooth curve. Let's see where that got to. I think I don't know where it is on the Mac menu. Here it's on a drop-down menu, the extended version of this. And we have two different kinds of ways to draw splines. And the easiest one is this one that's called a fit spline, where you put some points and it puts a line that goes right through those points. And then escape, enter ends it. Escape cancels the command, enter ends it, sorry. And these are good for koi ponds, what kind of thing you want to draw. They're editable by just dragging the points, and the program keeps on sort of recalculating the smoothness of the curves through them. They can cross and do zooty stuff. People doing typeface design use these a lot for this smooth curves between parts of a letter. Let me do another one. We can choose if we want to change this from one where the points that we control are right on it. Down here under method, if you in your properties is turned on for this polyline, this spline, sorry. There's other way that tells AutoCAD how to shape that curve, which is not fitting to the points we indicated, but called control vertices. And that's where we can drag these around and actually get sort of more subtle arrangements. You can change the rotation at each of those. I forget how you do that, but it's something that font designers use a lot. A problem with this for construction purposes is that unlike a polyline that has arc curves on it, where I can put a dimension on an arc segment and tell a contractor right where that right where the center point is and right where the radius is as he strikes that with a string and a piece of chalk. Polyline is entirely composed of straight line segments and true arcs that have a radius, part of a circle. There's a clear beginning and an end for each of those segments. A spline is one thing. It's not elliptical. It's just this bit shape that we really can't dimension. What you have to end up doing, and if you're using this in a real project, is sort of put points every once in a while like this, and then put up a dimension string, and then another one this way to tell just exactly where those are to some reference point. And people really don't like to build them. They don't like to build concrete forms that have to do that. I mean, you pay extra for it. When we're talking about moving things, any of these things that involve copying, moving, stretching, anytime we're moving objects or points, there's the idea of a vector, which sounds fancy, but a vector is simply
The idea of a distance at an angle.
It's not a line, it's just a concept. And in physics, you have force vectors. There's a given amount of force going in a given direction, but here it's a distance at an angle. So when we're moving something, let's get this out here so we can see it. When we're moving something, move. Really, all these commands are asking for a base point and a displacement. Where is this starting? And I can say anywhere, because a vector isn't tied to a location. It's just a distance and an angle. And I can say click here, and then drag it that distance at that angle, and that's how far that is moved or copied. Let me erase all this junk, actually. Erase all. Okay. Let's imagine for some reason, I want the outside edges of these rectangles to stay in the same place, but the ones in the middle to move together. Well, this is a polyline. I could drag that one over and drag that one over and drag that one over. But if they all want to move the same amount, I can use what's called the stretch tool. Just shortcut S for stretch. And stretch expects one of the crossing windows. Let's just use a rectangular one right now. Stretch is not looking at objects per se, it's just looking at vertices. So I click there and click here, and then I'm done picking, so I hit enter.
Then I can move all those vertices in the same direction at the same time.
F8 to lock them into horizontal and vertical. And this will be really useful. Okay, you've drawn a room, dimensions at 13 feet 0. And you've got windows and dimensions over here, and you've got a door and door swings and dimensions over here, and closet rods, I don't know all. And you realize, you come back and it didn't work out. You come back and realize it's only 12 feet. I remeasured it. I read my dimension wrong or something or other, and I really want it to be 12 feet. Do you erase all that? No, I really don't want to do that. You have a choice. You have to decide which one of these is going to get stretched. But let's say it's this one. So we'd pick all this sort of going left to right, indicate a base point, indicate 12 inches, and it would move on over the whole thing. And this comes up a lot in design where you've got a lot of stuff worked out, and then you realize, no, I need more room in the kitchen, but there's all this stuff here, and this all you just stretch it. And I should note that when you stretch it, the dimension will change to 12 feet as well. If the control point of the dimension, we'll talk about this Wednesday, if that's included, that moves as well. So I'm sort of working through here of working with existing objects and then creating new objects from existing ones and then tweaking existing ones. With move, a couple ways to do that. If I want this to go over exactly 6 feet in that direction, or 6 units, I forget how big these things are. If I just want to move it that way, I will turn ortho on with F8, which locks me into that direction. And then I can simply type 8 feet. And it moves that 8 feet. Just tell it which direction to go and how far. So I guess really in terms of the vector, the cursor told it what direction to go, and then the typing told it the distance. So we had the angle and the distance there together. Rotation, we can, I'll turn ortho off, just not to confuse things. Rotation for one or a group of things always has a base point that it goes around. Select.
Hit enter when done with selecting things.
And the first thing it asks for is a rotation base point. And that can be either on a corner in the middle, it could be over here. Let's just use it on here just for grins. And then you type in what you want. Let's just say 45. Let's make it something odd that we don't know. A lot of times when you're moving things around and trying to use new space plans, you do this and you realize, I really want to get that back to level again. And that's when the rotation tool, you can use it with a reference line so that you don't need to just like eyeball to try to get it zoomed in tight. So to do that, let's do RO. I picked it, I hit enter because I'm done picking. Again, I'll pick the base point. I want to make this line horizontal. Pick my base point, and I can try to eyeball that. But what I really want to do is say, take this line and bring it down to level. I don't want to have to type dimensions. I just want to graphically bring that right back down. So this is when you use, it tells me actually the rotation, but that's cheating. I'm going to type R for reference, because I have a reference angle that I'm going to start with. R, enter. And the reference angle is from that base point out to this point. And then the new angle, I'll hit F8 and come down right to horizontal from there. So that's probably worth practicing a time or two. The trick for me is realizing when I'm doing the reference angle, I pick this as the base point to start with, and then when it asks for my reference angle, I have to give it this point again, and this point, and then the point out here where it's coming to. A lot of these, there's just pay attention to the prompts that AutoCAD is providing. Get a sense of, well, there's a website called What Revit Wants. And it's like, okay, this is just how you have to do this here. And I think you could also have one of what AutoCAD wants, the routines of making this stuff all work out. There's sort of a similar thing with the scale command, which just makes things larger or smaller, as much in the X direction as in the Y. We don't do these independently at this point. So we'll do scale. Let's say C for scale. Yep. And I'll pick this. And I don't know how big it is, but I want it twice as big. So I can pick my base point. And then we have a choice up here on the command line to specify the scale factor, which is just the number. And if I want it twice as big, I just type 2 and hit enter and get something that's twice as big in the X and twice as big in the Y. One of the options of this is to leave the original and just create a new scaled copy. Let's look at that. SC for scale, select it, enter. I'll use this as the base. I'll use this as the base point, just right in the middle. And now it's saying specify the scale factor, or type C to copy it, an R for a reference point. Let's do C to copy. And now I do the scale factor. So I get it, the original plus the new one. And you never know when you're going to need these. I've never used copy scale in my life. I would copy something and scale it, but here it all is in one command. I don't know if it might have been there since 1985. I don't know. And let's do one more thing. Here's the door that I copied over from some other place. but it's too big for this particular opening. I would just like scale these guys down so the door fits, whatever that is. And that's where we're going to use scale reference. We're going to say these two guys together go from here to here. I want them to go from here to here. Just shrink it enough to fit. I don't know what the number is. I don't care. Just make it look good. So scale, select objects, enter. I'll use the hinge pretty much always to rotate or to scale around. R for reference. And again, like this, I have to tell it what the initial distance is and then what I want it to be. And that can be done with objects. It can be done with blocks, which are AutoCAD symbols once we start using those. But scale always works in the X and Y equally. You know what's nice is I don't have to say, do I need to do that again? Because it's on the video. Middle page 3, create new entities from existing. There's copy, which we've done. There's offset, mirror. The only thing with mirror to remember is MI for mirror. Once you click it, you got to remember to say erase source object, yes or no. To me, it should be keep source objects, yes or no, but it's erase source objects, yes or no. I guess, I don't know. So no, I think is the default. Erase source objects, no. I always have to think about it. No, so then you can get it like that. Start putting your hull together. But the cool one I want to show you is array. Let's at least do something interesting with it. 6-sided. An array creates copies of this as a one big single entity. So if we pick array A-R-A-Y, and that's, you know, it's got to be up here somewhere, right? Array, yeah. We'll pick this. It could be any number of objects, but let's just do it for one. And it gives us this really handy way to eyeball those. I think I got that turned on. You can do fewer rows, fewer columns. We can increase the distance between them. How's that for laying out restaurant tables? I forget what else. Oh, there's all this stuff up in here at the top. What are these? Base point, count, spacing, columns, rows, levels. Oh, we can also do this in 3 dimensions. So if I had 3-dimensional things, they'd be stacking up vertically as well. Not sure I could tell you what those all did as command line options. So I'm just going to say exit and get out of here. But the point is that this is like a little program running this. And over in properties, we can change. Well, we can drag things here, or be more explicit and say I would like 7 columns, and I would like them 2 feet apart. So all going back to this original point. Move the whole thing that way. Base point, I guess. And then I think we can. Whoa! I don't know what that did. Included axis 3 degrees. I guess that's the row distance. These will stay as one object unless you explode this with the explode command that turns them back into individual hexagons. And same thing with polylines, but we'll get there. Let's look at the circular arrays. Let's say you have a table with a chair, and you would like, let's do. And you would like 6 chairs around that table. We can select those and pick array. And then from the drop-down arrow, we're going to pick a polar array. Polar meaning in a circle. Why not circular? I don't know. Oh, it's the same. And it's going to, well, a series of prompts we need to pay attention to. Specify the center point of the array, which is going to be the center of this circle. So I'll turn object snaps on, and pick the center of that circle. And then these, and then we can, it defaults to 6, I guess, we'll just say, and then enter. And arrays, this array is also dynamic. So if we want to have not 6 chairs, but 8 chairs, we can see if those will look like they'll fit okay. Put stuff together like that very, very quickly. Just takes a little practice to get there. A couple of quick things. Just to refresh your memory. And we'll be using these shortly. Trim and extend. Did you use them in your drafting? Did that come up a bunch? Okay. And I guess the one thing I like to point out to you is that the default with, let's say, trim is just to pick the one little segment, and it just goes to the next time there's anything and gets rid of that. If instead you would like to trim this line out, let's say from the circle to the circle, everything inside there, instead of having to do pick, which could be exhaustive, you can tell AutoCAD which lines you want to be the cutting edges. So if we do trim, and then we typed a T to indicate the cutting edge, and pick the circle, and then we can pick this, and it will, enter, and then we can pick from, it ignores all the others, just pays attention to those. Filleting, we saw that. Chamfering, try that on your own. It's the same thing, except it's a little straight line instead of a rounded one. You can set the angle and the length of it. But the cool one here, and this is pretty new, is a blend tool. Let's say I'm drawing these two, and I need to connect them somehow that looks good for this garden path or koi pond or whatever. Blend. I don't even know where it is on the modify menu. It's got to be on the modify menu, right? Anyway, blend lets you pick the ends of two things, and it does the best it can to sort of put those together. And that's a spline. So if once it's there and you decide you want to mess with it a little more, you can mess with it some more, but puts that in there to start with. And the next thing would be, if you have a series of, let's say, lines and arcs that you want to turn into a polyline, so you can treat it all as one object instead of all these separate little pieces. Let's use. Let's say you have these guys, they're all separate right now. You would like to be able to move that around together for some reason. Join is the command. And you can either pick these one at a time or just window them. I'll pick them one at a time to be explicit about it. And now they're all one polyline. So if I use a move, they'll all go at one time. If you decide, no, I need to break this apart again, the explode command will take polylines apart into their individual components as well as arrays. Explode, that's usually there's like a little bomb icon or something or other, but explode will turn them back into their individual parts as well as arrays. Explode, pick, and now they're individual ones if you want to. And that cannot get put back into an array. That's done. You've killed it. Okay, lengthen is an interesting little tool. Just so you know it's there. If I want to make this longer and I'm dragging this, I can be changing the angle of it. And really don't want to do that. I just want to make it longer in exactly the angle that it's in right now. So I use lengthen, select, and we got a couple of choices. Delta means a difference. Like if I just want it to be 5 inches longer, I would use delta. If I want it to be 10% longer, I could do percent. If I wanted total, I could do T for total for the whole length of it, whatever it is now, or D for dy for dynamic. And that way you pick an end and it will just stretch out as much as you want. You know, extend would work the same way, coming down to something. That this works when there's nothing there to go to. It just keeps that same line continuing.
From there, we went on to draw the Fibonacci spiral, which took the rest of the class period.